In the foggy mountains of Western Virginia, where time seems to have stopped in the years 1950, there is a city with the prophetic name of OD. It is there, between dirt roads and huts forgotten by modernity, which lives the Whitaker family, protagonist of the most disturbing stories about consanguinity already documented in the States United. Ray Whitaker can't speak. At 36, this man of a slim and looked lost communicates only through grunts and inaccurate gestures. Your head is visibly smaller than normal medical characteristic known as microfill, and your eyes can never focus on the same point simultaneously. Documentaries recent revealed that Ray is the product of multiple generations of marriages between relatives nearby, a cycle that started with his great-grandparents and has perpetuated himself today. The house where RY lives with his brothers is a reflection of the secular neglect that marks this family. The wooden walls rot slowly while garbage accumulates in the yard where chickens vie for space with malnourished dogs. There is no running water functional, and electricity comes through exposed wires that serve dangerously by the precarious structures. Ray's medical records are virtually non-existent. Born at home like everyone the Whitaker, he has never received a formal diagnosis of his neurological conditions. The local, deeply religious and conservative community always treated the family as an embarrassing secret, preferring to ignore its existence to confront the reality of decades of social neglect. Betty Whitaker, Ray's sister, can articulate some words, but his disability intellectual is evident. She walks uncoordinated and has difficulty severe understanding. According to researchers who studied the family, Betty and Ray, they are children of parents who were first-degree cousins whose parents themselves also they had consanguineous relationships. Odd geographical isolation contributed to perpetuating this cycle. With only 7 or 79 inhabitants scattered through a hard-to-reach mountainous area, marriage options have always been limited. For decades, families like the Whitaker remained invisible to social services, creating whole generations of children with severe genetic deficiencies. The history of the Whitaker gained national attention only in 2020 when photographer Mark Leiter published a documentary about the family. The images shocked America. Adults with childish appearance, communication limited to animal noise, and living conditions that challenge basic human dignity. RY spends his days sitting on the porch of the house, watching the world with eyes that they will never be able to completely process the reality around you. He doesn't understand that their condition is the result of choices made for previous generations, nor that its existence represents one of the darkest chapters of social neglect American. Check it out if it is already subscribed to this channel. Here you discover hidden stories of America deep that no one else shows. In the heart of the Appalachians, where rural poverty intertwines with ancestral traditions questionable, a girl was born in 1992 that social workers identified just as Bethany in the official reports. Its history documented in the archives of the Caucus Department of Social Services reveals the devastating consequences when consanguinity becomes a practice normalized by generations. Bethany came into the world with a bifida spine, a congenital malfor that left his exposed spine and caused permanent leg paralysis. In addition, it was born with urinary and fecal incontinence, moderate hydrophilis, and severe cognitive limitations that prevented her from developing basic skills such as articulated speech or recognition of family faces. Their parents identified in the document such as Sarah and Billy Mackenzie were cousins first degree. Even more disturbing, his paternal and maternal grandparents also kept direct kinship relations, creating a family tree that looked more like a genetically deficient shrub. This concentration of similar genetic material had been accumulated by at least 4 generations, dramatically amplifying the chances of congenital malformations. Beth's discovery by the authorities happened by chance in October 1997. A storm had damaged telephone lines in the region and company technicians Electric had to access the property of Mackenzie for repairs. What found them traumatized? A 5-year-old, clearly malnourished, lying on a dirty mattress on the floor of a house without proper heating. Bethany had never attended school or received any kind of medical care. Their parents, both with obvious intellectual limitations, did not understand the severity of your condition. They fed her with remnants of food and left her alone for hours while working in a small tobacco plantation that barely supported the family. The report of the social worker who first visited the house describes a desolate scene. The child remains motionless of the time, communicates through moans low, and has clear signs of prolonged negligence. The domestic environment is unhealthy with a strong odor of urine and feces. Caregivers show affection for the child, but they are unable to provide adequate care due to their own limitations. The local community had known the situation of the Mackenzie family for years. But a combination of geographical isolation, distrust of the authorities, and the naturalization of consanguinity in the region had created a pact of silence. Neighbors occasionally brought food to the family, but never questioned the conditions of Beth's life. When it was finally removed from home and taken for medical evaluation, the results confirmed the worst fears of the experts. In addition to visible malformations, Bethany had partial hearing impairment, congenital heart problems, and a level of cognitive development equivalent to that of an 18-month child, although be 5 years old. Dr. Michael Harrison, a geneticist who examined Bethany at Louisville Children's Hospital, later stated, "This case represents one of the most extreme examples of endogamy I have already documenting. The chances of a child born with so many complications simultaneous in a family without a history of consanguinity would be practically zero." Bethany was placed in the adopted family specializing in the care of children with special needs. Their new caregivers reported small progress over the years. She learned to recognize family voices and developed a limited form of communication through gestures. However, their physical and cognitive limitations remained severe, requiring constant care for the rest of their lives. On an isolated farm in the east of Texas, surrounded by cotton fields that extend to the horizon, one of the most extreme cases of consanguinity and abuse already documented in the United States. The story of Marcus, as was identified in the police reports, it reveals how far degeneration can reach when incest becomes systematic within a family. Marcus was born in 2000, the result of a relationship between a 45-year-old man and his own 16-year-old daughter. What made this case even more shocking was the discovery that it was not the first occurrence in the family. Later records revealed that the father had maintained sex with at least 3 of its daughters over 2 decades, generating multiple children with severe genetic deficiencies. When the authorities finally arrived at the property, they found Marcus locked in a tool shed, sleeping on old newspapers and feeding on remains that someone occasionally left in a dog bowl. The 4-year-old had severe hydrophilis, making his head disproportionately large in relation to the slight body, their eyes constantly watery due to intracranial pressure. They could never focus properly. Marcus' total deafness had gone unnoticed by the family for years. They interpreted their lack of response to the cause as stubbornness or mental retardation without understanding that he simply could not hear. Also, problems congenital cardiacs made any physical exertion leave the child without breath, dramatically limiting your mobility. Marcus' behavior also had worrying characteristics. Second reports of the first caregivers who attended him. He showed episodes of inexplicable aggressiveness, biting and scratching anyone who tried approach. Experts later identified these behaviors as possible symptoms of neurological damage caused by extreme consanguinity and trauma of abandonment. The discovery of the case happened through an anonymous report made by a rural worker that occasionally provided services on the property. According to Yu's testimony, he had seen a child being locked in the shed and noticed that he never played outdoors like other children. The connection to the line of complaints of the Department of Family Services of Texas began an investigation that would reveal one of the most disturbing stories of family neglect ever recorded in the state. If you are feeling the weight of this story as I felt, comment now. No one born condemned. When officers entered the property with search warrant, they found not only Marcus, but evidence that other children had lived in conditions similar. Old photographs showed at least 2 other boys with physical characteristics similar to those of Marcus. But these children had died in the first years of life, supposedly due to the natural causes that have never been investigated properly. Marcus's father, identified as Robert Earl Thompson, was arrested and later sentenced to life imprisonment for multiple accusations of child sexual abuse and neglect criminal. During the trial, even more disturbing details emerged. Thompson had isolated his family from the outside world for more than 2 decades, forbidding his daughters to attend school or keep in touch with people from outside the property. Marcus' medical evaluation revealed irreversible neurological damage. Beyond hydrophilis and deafness, it had micrognathia, underdeveloped lower jaw, swallowing problems that required feeding through probe, and severe delay in the motor development. Their mental age was estimated at approximately 8 months despite being 4 years old. The state of Texas took over the custody of Marcus, placing it in a specialized center in the care of children with complex medical needs. Caregivers reported that initially Marcus did not show typical emotional reactions. It did not smile, not he cried when he was injured and seemed disconnected from the world around him. Took months of intensive care for him to begin to demonstrate basic signs of recognition and affection. Today, more than 2 decades later, Marcus remains under institutional care permanent. He never developed communication or independent skills basic, remaining in a state of total dependence. Its history became a study case used in genetic medicine and social work courses, illustrating the devastating consequences of extreme consanguinity combined with neglect. Systematic familiar. In the vast northern Dakota plains, where the wind cuts as a blade and the winter extends for endless months, there is a religious community that has been generations maintains traditions that the outside world would consider archaic. It was in this environment of deliberate isolation that were born in 2008, 2 twins that would illustrate in a devastating how endogamy can even affect brothers born of the same womb. The New Harmony Colony, founded in 1952 by fundamentalist families seeking living according to literal interpretations of the Bible, had developed over the decades a social structure that discouraged marriages with people outside the community, with only 180 inhabitants distributed in 30 families. The marriage options were severely limited, resulting in decades of marriages between cousins and even between uncles and nieces. Rebecca and Alyssa Miller were born of parents who were first-degree cousins. More yet, both paternal and maternal grandparents also maintained close kinship, creating a genetic concentration that specialists later would characterize as catastrophic. While Rebecca was born seemingly healthy, developing normally in the first months of life, Alyssa came into the world with such a rare condition that initially confused even experienced doctors. Alyssa was born with Fraser syndrome, an extremely rare congenital malformation which occurs in approximately 1 in 200,000 births in populations with normal genetic diversity. In your case, the condition manifested itself in a particularly severe. His eyes were completely covered with skin, creating a smooth surface where the eyelids should be. In addition, she was born without ears external with genital malformations and breathing problems that required assistance. Constant doctor. The reaction of the community of New Harmony to Alyssa's condition revealed the depth of the beliefs that had shaped this society isolated for decades. Many members of Colony interpreted the birth of the child as divine punishment by sins not specified, while others saw their condition as a faith test sent by God. This theological perspective had devastating practical consequences. Alyssa was maintained hidden from the view of external visitors and was never officially presented to congregation. During the first 2 years of life, Alyssa lived in a room in the back of the house familiar, cared for exclusively by his mother, Sarah Miller. The girl was never taken to Sunday cults, did not participate in community meals, and its existence was known only by immediate family members and the religious leaders of the colony. This social segregation began from birth and intensified according to their medical needs have become more evident. The discovery of Alyssa's situation by state authorities happened accidental during a routine investigation on home education in the colony. In 2010, inspectors of the Dakota Dort Education Department visited New Harmony to check if the children were receiving adequate instruction as required by state law. During these visits, an inspector noticed medical records for 2 children born on the same date in the Miller family, but was only presented to Rebecca. When asked about the second child, the parents initially claimed that she had died in childbirth. However, inconsistencies in medical documents led to a further investigation. Social workers eventually discovered Alyssa, then 2 years, living in conditions that characterized as medical negligence severe. The girl was severely malnourished, weighing less than babies of 6 months, and showed signs of chronic respiratory infections that had never been treated properly. Their facial malformations had gotten worse due to the lack of early medical intervention, and she showed severe delays in the development that they went beyond their congenital physical limitations. Dr. James Peterson, specialist in craniofacial malformations at the Children's Hospital Minneapolis, who later examined Alyssa, described her condition as one of the more severe manifestations of Fraser syndrome I've ever found, aggravated by years of medical negligence. He explained that early surgical interventions could have significantly improved its quality of life, but the window to many of these procedures had closed due to the delay in treatment. Alyssa was immediately transferred to specialized medical care and placed under state custody. Multiple surgeries were performed in an attempt to improve their respiratory capacity and create functional eye openings, but the results were limited due to the extent of its malformations and the time lost in the early years' crucial development. Currently, Alyssa lives in an institution specializing in the care of children with complex medical needs. She never developed functional vision or skills verbal communication, depending on fully caregivers for all activities basic. Its history illustrates not only the genetic consequences of consanguinity but also as extreme religious beliefs can aggravate situations already desperate. Rebecca, her twin sister, was maintained with her biological family but under strict supervision of social services. Today teenager, she has normal development, serving as a painful contrast to the fate that was waiting for his sister from birth. The Cape Girardeau Regional Hospital, Missouri, was not prepared for what arrived on its doors on a cold morning of December 2015. A young woman appearing to be between 20 and 25 years old. He staggered in the emergency room carrying a baby involved in dirty rags. She left the child on a chair in the waiting room and disappeared before any employee could question her. What followed revealed one of the most disturbing stories of multi-generational consanguinity already documented in the American Midwest. The baby, a girl of approximately 6 months, had immediate signals from severe neglect and congenital malformations. His head was visibly smaller than the normal medical characteristic known as microphyll, and she weighed only 4.5 pounds, typical weight of a newborn. Even more alarming, she was born completely without tooth, an extremely rare condition called anodontics, which in babies may indicate deep genetic problems. The medical team that first examined the child was shocked by the extension of his medical needs. In addition to microphyll and anodontics, he had problems. Severe swallowing that prevented it from feeding normally, malformations in the palate that affected their breathing, and clear signs of severe neurological delay. Your eyes, although anatomically normal, showed no ability to focus or follow objects, suggesting possible damage to the central nervous system. Investigation into the child's identity led the authorities to discover a network complex of rural families in southeastern Missouri who had practiced consanguinity for at least 5 generations. Through DNA analysis and genealogical research, it was determined that the baby was a product of multiple layers of endogamy. His parents were mean siblings. Their grandparents were first-degree cousins, and great-grandparents also maintained direct kinship relations. Cape Girardeau County Sheriff Marcus Williams described the investigation as one of the most disturbing of my 25-year career in law enforcement. Search by the child's mother led the investigators to a network of isolated rural properties where multiple families with interchangeable surnames lived in conditions of poverty extreme, maintaining a cycle of consanguinity that had become normalized to the over decades. Fragmentary records suggested that the baby's mother, identified only as Crystal, it was itself a product of consanguinity and presented severe intellectual limitations. Witnesses reported that she had become pregnant at the 16th anniversary of a man who could be your half-brother or close cousin, but paternity has never been determined definitely due to the complexity of family relationships and the refusal of families to cooperate with the authorities. Crystal and the alleged father of the child had fled the region weeks before the abandonment of the baby, leaving behind a trail of clues that revealed the extent of neglect that the child had suffered from birth. Neighbors reported hearing constant crying coming from the property where they lived, but no one had intervened due to a combination of fear, distrust of the authorities, and normalization of family dysfunction in the local community. The baby's full medical evaluation revealed damage that went far beyond malformations visible. Neurological examination showed brain development severely compromised, with some areas of the brain underdeveloped or completely absent. Its hearing capacity was limited, and reflex tests indicated possible damage to the spinal cord that would permanently affect their mobility. Dr. Amanda Foster, geneticist at St. Louis Children's Hospital who consulted in the case, explained that the levels of consanguinity necessary to produce so many anomalies simultaneous are extraordinary. This child represents what happens when multiple generations of endogamy accumulate without any genetic diversity introduced in the familiar pool. Since the child had been abandoned without name or documentation, the team of the hospital decided to call her Hope. Hope in English. This name reflected not only the desire of caregivers that their condition could improve, but also the hope that its story could serve as a warning to prevent similar cases in the future. Hope remained in the hospital for 8 months while the authorities tried to locate family members arranged and able to take care of her. During this period, she went through multiple surgeries to correct respiratory and food problems, but their prognosis remained reserved. Neurologists determined that she never would develop cognitive skills beyond the level of a baby of a few months. The state of Missouri took over Hope's permanent custody, putting it in a home specializing in the care of children with complex medical needs. Today, 9 years, and Elle remains in a state of total dependence requiring food through probe, respiratory assistance at night, and constant medical care. She never learned to sit without support, did not develop communication skills, and it has frequent seizures that require continuous medication. Hope's story has become a case studied in medical schools and social service across the country. Your case illustrates not only the genetic consequences devastators of prolonged consanguinity, but also as rural poverty, social isolation, and systemic neglect can create conditions where such tragedies are perpetuated for generations. Attempts to locate Crystal and the child's father continued for years, but they never were found. They are believed to have left Missouri, possibly driving to other isolated rural communities where they could continue to live on the fringes of society. The possibility that they have had other children in similar conditions remains a constant concern for local authorities. Hope's case also revealed significant gaps in the rural children's protection system. Many of the families involved in the consanguinity network had lived for decades without regular contact with social services, formal education, or preventive medical care. This social invisibility created an environment where harmful practices could continue without external intervention. Nurses and caregivers who work with Hope report that despite their limitations severe, it occasionally demonstrates signs of consciousness that are deeply moving. It can recognize family voices and occasionally produce sounds that suggest attempts to communicate. These moments, though rare, remember all the involved that behind medical statistics, there is a real person whose potential. It was irreversibly limited by decisions made generations before its birth. Hope's story serves as a dark reminder that even in the 21st century, practices that most consider past relics continue to occur in isolated pockets of the rural America. Your case highlights the need for continuous surveillance, education community, and proactive intervention to protect vulnerable children who may be living in similar conditions in other parts of the country. Today, Hope is still being cared for with dedication by a medical team that treats her with dignity and respect despite its limitations. Its history, although tragic, contributed for changes in children's protection policies in Missouri and served as a catalyst for greater awareness of the dangers of consanguinity in isolated communities. If you watched so far, it is because you like this story. Leave a comment saying me I watched here so I can meet you and know who really likes the stories here from the channel. Like this video to help give visibility to forgotten stories as these and share who you think you need to know about these cases that America prefers to forget. Made with Red Heart #ByGlasp.